Hello there, I am the Common Sense Guy. Today we're going to be doing a follow-up video to the Telford rape scandal, or the Telford grooming gangs, or the Telford Muslim grooming gangs, or Asian grooming gangs. That all depends on who you ask, who you're talking to, and what news outlet that you're using. Today we're going to be using the BBC's news outlet, because I want to talk about how hypocritical the BBC are. This is not anything like where I've done before, where I'm trying to say that we should close down the BBC or anything else like that. Though, please feel free to talk about that in the comment section below, because I'm sure that we'd all find some reason for getting rid of the BBC. But in this instance, it's a case that I'm going to be talking about the fact that the BBC themselves, without any other forms of investigation or anything else on that, the BBC themselves, BBC Shropshire to be precise for Telford, knew about these Asian rape gangs, Muslim rape gangs, or whatever words you want to use to describe what they are, knew about them in 2010. 8 years ago. 8 years ago. And in fact, the reporter that reported on this obviously knew it a year beforehand, so you knew it from 2009, or at least was given the go-ahead, meaning the editorials at least knew about it from 2009, at least. Why was it held under the carpet so much? Why was it held back? Now, without further ado, let's get into this video, and I want to go through the story. So, let's get straight into this, shall we? As you can see, it says BBC Shropshire, and then just underneath the Shropshire, it's got BBC Local. Directly to the right of that, as if you were writing, it says page last updated at 6:05 Greenwich Mean Time, Monday, 10th of May, 2010, 07:05 UK. Just to give you an idea that I am not pulling your leg when I said that this is almost 10 years down the line from being reported, and nothing's been done about it. But we shall see. So this has been reported by somebody called Andy Giddings. Telford and Wrekin Council and West Mercer Police are working with 40 children thought to be victims or targets of sex exploitation in the Telford area. So, carrying on, I was first told about the issue around 12 months ago. So, as I said before, just to collaborate what I was talking about, this reporter himself, though obviously he wouldn't be able to prove that he knew, but did know that this was going on since 2009 at least. So that is almost 10 years of the BBC not doing anything, just listening and passing it over, not bothering. Is this the same things that our local authorities did? Is this the same thing that our police did? We'll find out, considering that it still hasn't been reported on too much by the BBC, still hasn't been reported on too much by anybody at this moment in time, really. Let's find out, shall we? I was chatting to Mark Berry from the Sanctuary Group in Wellington. While waiting to do an interview, he mentioned he was concerned about teenage girls being groomed by criminals in Telford and used for sex. Mum reveals how child was groomed, and these are the citations that he uses, close to home. Like a lot of people, I always assumed that sex trafficking involved girls being brought in from Eastern Europe, not girls from our own country. And we're going to carry on very, very soon. But I just wanted to prove one last point before we carry on, because this point is really, really important. Something like the BBC was able to do an investigation in this in 2010 and was published and was finalised by May in 2010. Why did none of us know about it? Why was it only reported on the local area? Why was it not reported nationally? And by the way, if you think, oh, this is a little bit early, yeah, you'd be right. It was still 6 years before the Rotherham and the Newcastle rape gangs were actually reported on. They all started getting reported on in 2016 and 2017, respectively. So, carrying on, second paragraph. When I heard that Telford police were also looking into the issue, led by Detective Chief Inspector Alan Edwards, I decided it was time to have a proper look into the story. and this is around 2009. Researching it was hard at first because there's still very little information out there, and it's not obvious which groups or government agencies have responsibility for this. In other words, nobody was really paying any sort of attention, and nobody really wanted to have any sort of, let's say, responsibility for it. Nobody wanted to clarify what was actually going on, obviously, so nobody was able to tell this gentleman where to start, where to go. So, DCI Edwards pointed me to some articles online and suggested I get in touch with a few people, including the Coalition for the Removal of Pimping in Leeds. When I travelled up to Leeds in early February, I found that the stories I was being told there were familiar ones. And this is very, very important. And they were being heard all over the country. Remember the date of this. This is not 2018. This is 8 years ago, 2010, when this gentleman wrote this. And this is him writing this, and it's for the BBC. And they were being heard all over the country. That's very, very telling. Very, very telling. The fact that this has been covered up by BBC, by the government in general, for at least over 8 years, to the fact where the reporters in which have just done some research by talking to somebody in a coalition of the removal of pimping in Leeds have come out and said that they are hearing these type of stories all over the country. What more can we want? What more do we need? And this was 8 years ago. I will be sending this to the BBC. I also will be sending this to every form of newspaper. The Telegraph, the Guardian, the Daily Mail, the Sun. I will be sending it to all of them, this video, just to see if they can get the citations and print their own story. I know that they're not going to use my video for it, and I'm not bothered about it. That's up to them what they want to do. But this needs to be talked about. The fact that the BBC knew about this 8 years ago, the reporters are saying that it's being heard all over the country, and yet it wasn't national fucking news. Really? Let's carry on. That's not trying to make things political. I want to carry on with the story. So, grooming young girls. The common story was that young girls were being approached by slightly older boys who would befriend them, offer them gifts, and play the part of their boyfriend. Then they introduced the girls to older men, and either through threats, gifts, powers of persuasion, or drugs and alcohol, they persuade them to have sex with these men. I was told the Dutch authorities called this the lover boy process. Interesting that it's actually recognised across different parts of the world, and different groups have different ways of doing things, and the way that things are actually done is done by a particular group. It's interesting, isn't it? That these things actually come across and have different names. I don't think it's a case of people should be interested, as I have suggested, that how they've gone about it. But it's the fact that people that use these techniques are using them all over the world. And as the reporter said at the beginning of this, the fact that trafficking girls or using them for sex or pimping them for sex generally doesn't happen in this country, but comes from abroad. Well, it just goes to show you that it happens in every country. But that's the problem. It's something that we need to sort. We need to stop these people from doing that, don't we? The girls are groomed to think this is normal behaviour and that their boyfriends love them, and many find it hard to break out of this illusion. They are also often turned against their own families. I mean, I hope we get into some substance from this story very, very soon. The way that they're suggesting that the girls were groomed was completely different to the way that these stories have come out recently. They're trying to suggest, I don't know whether or not he did full research into everything or if he's assuming, I don't know. Be interesting to speak to him on that one. But the story that he is talking about seems to be different to how Other people collaborated their stories to begin with, and with the Daily Mail when it was broken. So, let's carry on, shall we? So starting from the top, I know it's hard to read the top, but it is continuing on from what we just said. So there are also often turned against their own families and given new mobile phones to contact their boyfriends. And I say it's in quotations because we all know that this is they're not boyfriends. They're all to do with grooming and making sure that they're plump for sex. It soon became clear, though, that there just isn't enough known about the scale of the problem. No, there still isn't. And there still wasn't even... Sorry, I don't need to swear. There still wasn't even 8 years ago when you did this report. Crops Chair Hilary Warner told me that the small team had spoken to more than 400 families in the last 3 or 4 years. Barnardos produced a report last year saying it was dealing with 609 victims. Yet they would all accept that they're just scratching the surface of this issue. And that is in 2008, my friends. 2008. And the BBC didn't think that it was worth putting on national news that at least 609 victims have fallen prey and victims to these groups of men, when at the time there was only 155 something thousand people in the whole of Telford. It's not a massive village. It really isn't. So these are quite heavy on the statistics, meaning that a lot of people knew what was going on. There are other people trying to do something about this. In Derby, there was a woman called Sheila Taylor, who's the chair of the National Working Group for Sexually Exploited Children and Young People. Sheila Taylor has been looking into the issue for the last 10 years. And obviously we know that this now goes all the way back to the 80s. But still, at this point, from the BBC and the reporter's point of view, if it goes back at least 10 years at that point, it means it goes back to 98. At that point, because you're at 2008 now, or 2010, it at least goes back to 2000s. At least. It's just horrid, isn't it? It's just horrid that people have been left on their own like this. Been left to fend for themselves. But she surprised me by saying our interview was the first she'd ever done. The first interview that she's ever done regarding these people. At least 609 people from Barnardos. That's ridiculous. That means that even the police wouldn't have got involved with her or even talked to her or anything else like that. This is the first interview that she's ever done. Let's just read the next bit and carry on. Taylor attempts to coordinate work done by charities, council and the police all around the country. But she says that some areas take the problem far more seriously than others. In some parts of the country, there is even a denial that child sex exploitation exists. You wouldn't have thought that, would you? You wouldn't have thought that there was a denial going around, would you? The fact that it was 8 years ago and nobody's actually mentioned it since, and people could have actually have stopped other forms of sexual exploitation in different, I don't know, towns. Maybe, for instance, in 2011 to 2013 in, what was it? Oh, Rotherham. And from 97 all the way up to 2014 in Newcastle. Maybe the people spoke out a little bit more and actually, I don't know, produced it nationally to let the people know that there is a story out there and to look out for it. Maybe it would have saved a couple of people. No, yes, that is conjecture and I don't have any basis for that. But it's still a point. If the news was brought out there, do you not think that more people would have been more vigilant? Do you not think that the police would have been forced to do their job even more than what they were supposed to do it now? Because I would like to think so. So, staying safe in Telford, which is funny, if you believe any of the statistics that are going on and the fact that people have been murdered for it. But we'll see. I also spent a couple of nights out in Wellington watching the work done by the Sanctuary Group. I'm sorry if I butchered that. Sanctuary is a church organisation which meets every Saturday, offering people leaving clubs and bars a safe, relaxing place to unwind before they make their way home. I was met there by a local mother who believed her daughter was targeted. The mother said she often saw the men responsible parked there on Saturday nights, but the night there were police cars parked in the spaces often used. So they knew how to stop it then. If the police were actually parking in the places where they actually were stopping people from coming across, they knew what was going on, roughly. Maybe. I don't know. Again, conjecture. Later through, we spotted a group of young girls staggering out of a club and walking straight past the row of waiting taxis. We followed them and saw them approached by a group of young men outside another bar. This should be interesting. Let's carry on. The mother claimed these were the same men who had targeted her daughter. It seemed it was happening again right before our eyes. A couple of weeks later, the mother agreed to be interviewed herself. And one thing that impressed me was how she drew strength from her faith. Which is fine. It's in these type of positions and in these type of situations, I can understand how some people would turn to an all-powerful being, supposedly, that would protect them, when the human beings and the authorities and the police wouldn't. So, when you've got nothing else left, I can imagine that you would turn to somebody like that. She was also willing to forgive the men who had targeted her daughter, but it was also very clear that better awareness of the issue was needed. The mother admitted at first she didn't know who to turn to. She's a lot more either stupid or braver than what I am. I would never be able to forgive any man, regardless of sex, regardless of culture, any man that sexually targeted my daughters. I don't even want to say on a video what I would do if I ever found out that somebody or something would be doing that. I do not want to say, just in case it ever happens and this is used against me. But on that note, it still seems very, very weird that you would even ask her if you would forgive the men, or if it was actually her that suggested that she would forgive the men. I'd like to know how the questioning went on that one. But let's go on to turning a stone. We decided to approach Telford and Wrekin Council about setting up a joint awareness campaign. We agreed to produce a set of information leaflets along with an information line operated by the BBC. So this is how much that the BBC actually knew about everything that was going on. In 2008 in Telford, they were willing to put leaflets out and a telephone number to phone, but yet still did not deem this worthy enough to be national news. Why? This is the question that I really want to get across to everybody. Why? I want the BBC to respond. I know that they won't because I'm a little person. But I pay my TV licensing fee. You take my tax. I want to know why this was not produced as a national story. Carrying on. Along with our series of radio broadcasts. So it was even put onto radio. So it's not like editors didn't have a clue what was going on. We aim to get as much information out there as possible for both young people and their parents. One of the Telford and Wrekin Council team looking after victims said, "It was like turning a stone. Every time you turn it, there is more information hidden underneath, and once you start looking into the subject, you realise what a big issue it is." We decided to go with that as our slogan. It just goes to show you that were they actually interested in doing what was going on, because the more that they dig, the more that they found, and the more work they had to do. I don't know, maybe that is a little bit of conjecture, and maybe that's just me being passive-aggressive about an issue that affects me. But at the same time, it's something that I would consider why things weren't done quicker, and why the BBC didn't do what they needed to do, why the council haven't done what they needed to do and safeguard every person that was there, and why the police didn't do what they were supposed to do fucking quicker. On that note, we're going to keep on carrying on. There were more interviews to be done. with the head of the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Centre in London, with barnardos, with a member of the council's Children Abused Through Exploitation team, and with a woman from the Methodist Church in Birmingham who has been researching the issue. The point was made that it isn't a new problem. It's been going on in this country for years. But it seems that people are finally starting to sit up and take an interest. No, unfortunately, my friend, no, they didn't. They did not give a damn about it. They did not care. They didn't even want to put it in national news at this point in time. And that's the sad thing. The fact that you even put in here that it has been going on for years, and the fact that you think as well, which you put in here before, that you think that it's in every town, every city. The same as barnardos have said exactly the same thing. That is such a worrying thing to me that even now we're still not talking about it in an issue in which we need to talk about it. I know this is not to do with race, this is not to do with culture, at least not in my eyes. We have to look at the actual problems and deal with the problems as they arise. No prejudice, no anxious, nothing else, no anger, nothing. We need to sort this out and find out the reasons why this carries on, why this goes on, and most importantly, the reasons why the police cannot do their job, or do not do their job. We need to find out the reasons why. I just wanted to reread what we actually said on the last bit. The point was made that this isn't a new problem, meaning and suggesting that they've known about this for a very long time. Meaning that they know that it's been in the country, in the towns, in the cities for a while. It's been going on in this country for years. I think that is the most telling point that you can put into any sort of news article that should have been put into the national news. That it's been going on for years. Then you also have the next biggest point, which is the fact of the person who wrote this article suggesting that it is happening in every city and every town. It is happening in every town across the UK. And unfortunately, this person 8 years ago thought that people were finally sitting up and taking an interest. Well, that didn't work. That didn't happen. Not because of you. You did your bit. Your editors, the people in control of the BBC and so on and so forth, let people down on telling what was going to happen in the news. I'm not even going to get into the facts of how the police, the social services, the schools and everything else let these kids and children down. But that's a video for another day. So, let's carry on. The head of CEOP told me to respect a series of prosecutions over the next year, and a woman from the Methodist Church suggested that it was like the days when we first started to accept child abuse was happening, or domestic violence. Suddenly people were starting to talk about the issues. Unfortunately, people stopped talking about the issues, didn't they? They stopped talking about the issues, swept it under the carpet, under the rug, whatever term you want to use for that. But they've hidden it. And we need to ask questions as the public. Why news organisations such as the BBC, and the reason why I'm picking on the BBC is because I can't find any others that went into it at this time. Especially not in a Pacific area where there is rape and grooming gangs operating and have been caught and some of them prosecuted. I want to know the reasons why that the BBC have done this. Well, they haven't put this as national news and put more awareness out there and gave more people the confidence to be able to come forward and talk about these issues. But apparently even 8 years on, it still doesn't matter. And the hope is that by talking about the issues and warning people of the dangers, we're going some way to stopping these crimes from happening. Nope. Unfortunately, my friends, though you tried to do this and put it onto the local news stations and the BBC Shropshire in itself, it hasn't really done much to distill the fact that these things happen and nobody's talking about it. I think that's the massivest problem that we have in our country. The fact that we do not talk about it. But the fact that if we do, we're racist. And if we don't, then we're cowards. Where's the middle ground so we can actually talk about this without actually trying to say that we are racist or we are Islamophobic or whatever words you want to use today to try and quell the argument? These arguments need to be taking place. We need to find out what's going on. We need to protect our children. And that's the most important thing about this. Not political debate, not ideological stances, not where you stand on a political spectrum. The fact that our children all over the country, and there will be more to come, I can guarantee it, that need to be protected. And the police are not doing their jobs. The social services are not doing their jobs. The schools are not doing their jobs to protect the children. And this is the worst thing that we can do, is just let this carry on and let this continue. But yet, that's what we're going to do. That's how we're going to be. To this point that, yes, I understand that certain other news articles are important, i.e. Russia one at this moment in time, where it doesn't mean that you focus on it solely. These are the things that affect the country as a whole, and they need to be talked about. There needs to be a national debate about it, not political shutout, which seems to be the same as it seems to be almost a shutout in mainstream media as well. And it's only been reported on because somebody like the Daily Mail and the Sunday Mail were able to actually report on it, get the figures and everything else like that, and we're actually able to, I don't know, do journalism, report the news. This is the reason why I want the BBC to answer for this, because they could have broke this story 8 years ago, and they didn't. Why didn't they break it? Why didn't they let the people know what was going on? They're a national news organisation. Why couldn't they have broadcasted this as a national level? I have my own theories, but there's no point me going into my own theories because that's not what this video is about. This video is about getting the BBC to answer for it and find out the reasons why it took over 8 years for it to even produce another story to do with Telford. Why didn't it do a follow-up to say what was going on? Why did it take 8 years for it to do a follow-up? And that was probably even being pushed as well to do it. But as I said, I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to say thank you very much for watching this video. If you do like what I'm doing and what I'm saying, then please give me a like, share this video, subscribe to this channel, and help me up as best as you can. Thank you very much. As I said, on that note, I bid you farewell. I bid you adieu. I'll speak to you all again real soon. Bye-bye for now.